Welcome back to movementprofessional.com. So this is video 3 in a response I had to a question on YouTube about shoulder pain with overhead pressing. So the last video I went over barbell pressing and the cues to use here. Today I'm going to go over kettlebell pressing, and this could be generalized to dumbbell pressing, although some of the cueing for the grip will be a little bit different. If you have the option between pressing with the dumbbell and the kettlebell, I would choose the kettlebell just because it's going to be easier to follow the cues I'm talking about to keep the shoulder where you want it, and then the line of drive will tend to be a little bit better as far as the wrist angle with the forearm. All right, so with the kettlebell, you have a different ability to grip the handle than you do with the barbell. You're also going to have the ability to move your body in such a way where you can create a little bit of maybe purposeful movement to bias one shoulder in a different position than the other. And that's fine to do, and in many ways when you do have shoulder pain that's asymmetrical, where it's on one side and it's not on the other, well, you're likely going to have some range of motion differences on one side versus the other. So it's fine to be aware of those and actually make little adjustments to work around some symptoms, and that might end up being your path. None of us are perfectly symmetrical, so when you have the option to do a weight on one side, it's fine to make some adjustments. So I'll talk about some ideas of how to think about those adjustments. But the first thing I want to think of is just what's my front rack position here, what's my grip. So when we were doing the barbell, we created torque on the bar here. We don't have to create as much torque where we're trying to turn the bell, but what we want to do is really get our grip secure. So I have this handle lying pretty low on the palm. I actually have the bottom angle, or the bottom part of the handle, right on the bottom part of the pinky side of the wrist, and that's where I want to grip as tight as I can and create a squeeze through there. So I'm thinking about squeezing with my pinky as much, if not more, than I'm thinking about with my thumb, because that's going to be my bias towards the external rotation that we talked about with the barbell. So once I get that feeling, that squeeze there, my idea is just going to be able to keep the elbow under the wrist and keep that angle as I press up and down. So I'm always going for this vertical forearm position where the elbow stays under the wrist. Now I can be out a little bit wider, I can be straight up. Typically it's going to be somewhere in the middle that feels best, but again, that's going to be different based on any symptoms that you might be having with your shoulder, and one shoulder might be different than the other. But the key to create this external rotation activity as well as the lat engagement is to make sure that the grip is low and that you have some strength towards the pinky side. Because the thumb is bigger and more robust, typically if we just squeeze as hard as we can, we're going to really think about more thumb, which is going to bias this whole line more on the thumb side of the hand, and that actually moves us away from external rotation, where on this side of the hand, if I get a little bit more squeeze, that's going to help to keep me engaged more on the lats and the external rotator. So the grip is your first thing you want to think about. If you're not thinking about that, make sure that that's something that you're working with, and that might just change your shoulder symptoms right there. Okay, so that's the start. The other thing is, just like we did with the barbell press, we got to be fixed in our center. So core engaged, glutes tight. We don't want to be leaning back without control. We want to make sure that we're staying put there. We don't want to over squeeze our shoulder blades together, and that moves the rib cage forward and changes the whole dynamics of the scapula on the rib cage. All right, so we're getting that fixed point. Now, if we do have some asymmetries, one thing that I've noticed with a lot of patients is that the right side, for many people, it's an easier time getting the arm overhead compared to the left, and that there is a little bit more internal rotation, or hand behind back activity on the left than the right for a lot of people. So I'm going to use that just sort of as an archetype to talk about how to make some adjustments around that. So if you are a person that is more limited on the right than the left, this is going to be the exact cues to try to use. If it's reversed and you're more limited on the right than the left, then you would just reverse these. So just keep that in mind. All right, so if there is more range of motion overhead on the right, but less internal rotation on the right, oftentimes that indicates that the body is actually wanting to go to the right. So we're just going to set ourselves a little bit to the left. So the cues that we would use for that is, before we even pick up the bell, we would just want to feel that left foot a little heavier into the ground than the right. So both feet are planted, but I'm just going to think about my left heel a little bit more than I'm going to think about my right. And I might even set my left toes about a ½ inch back than my right, just so I feel like I'm shifting everything a little bit to the left. All right, so once I get that position there, still feeling heavy through the left, I might engage my left abs a little bit more than the right, because I'm just trying to bias everything a little bit more left than it might normally be. And then as I press up, it clears out some of the symptoms that can often be felt up higher and up in the front. So it's just a cue to try to use. I may reach this left arm down, try to engage the triceps. I'm locking out the tricep here, locking out the tricep on the left side. So I feel left abs, I might feel my left glute a little bit more than I feel the right. And then you can just see how that cueing feels for shoulder symptoms. Because the idea here is if my body is a little bit turned here, I'm kind of jamming too far in that direction every time the bell comes up. So getting to the top, it's almost pushing me into a hyper overhead position, and that might be more than my body needs to go, so I might need to set myself a little bit to the left to go there. If I'm limited on the overhead position, which I would be on the left side here, then I'd still set the same positioning here because I want to actually turn to the left. If I'm turning to the right, now my arm is going to come right, so forcing this is going to be a little bit tight. So instead of forcing it just with the shoulder, I want to just turn my whole body there so I can still keep that same path. So the cueing would be very much the same. I'd find my grip. I try to feel the back of the shoulder first, abs tight, just a little heavier through the left. My right arm now, I might run a reach forward because it's steering me a little bit more to the left as I come up and down, trying not to over shrug, trying to keep some activity in the lat, keeping that grip on the pinky side as I go up and down. But the whole time I'm pressing up, I might be reaching a little bit with the right to help steer me a little bit to the left. And these are subtle cues. There's something to play with, but you have the option to play with some asymmetrical cues when you're doing a single-sided press. I've seen it work in my practice with my own body and with some other clients. So something to think about. If it's too complex, feel free to ask another question. I'll see you next time.